Imagine being just 16 years old and winning 2 medals at the Pan American Games, and then just 1 year later competing in the Olympics at just 17 years of age. Think about the mindset and the iron will that you have to have at such a young age to compete at that level. Well, my guest today, Kaitlin Sandeno, is going to talk about that mindset. And that mindset is so applicable to business. It's so applicable to your health and your nutrition and how you live your life. And she has just great gems, and she shares openly about her journey in competing at the highest level, including the Olympics, on multiple occasions. But what I love most is that she's really found her calling in helping a charitable organization called the Jessie Rees Foundation, and she's going to talk about that as well. This is just a wonderful interview, and she was a pleasure to talk with. Kaitlin is a former elite competitive swimmer, Olympic gold medalist, world champion, and former world record holder. She also is now the national spokesperson of the Jessie Rees Foundation, a motivational speaker, a swim coach, a sports commentator and MC, and a host for world-class sporting events. Yes, it's a mouthful because she's done so much and she continues to do so much. And we're going to learn all about her journey today. So without further ado, Kaitlin, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast.
Thank you so much, Roger. I'm thrilled to be with you today.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be a great one. I'm going to hold it up for you on watching on YouTube. I'm holding up Kaitlin's book called Golden Glow, and it's her journey. And it really starts when Kaitlin is about 3 years old and gets into the pool for the first time and loves it. And so, Kaitlin, that would be a great point to start because you end up medaling in 2 different Olympics, and you have this entire journey, and you held world records. But it started as a little girl getting in the pool, and apparently your parents said you absolutely loved it from the first second. So what are your memories of that?
Just being a huge water baby. Like as soon as I was walking, I was going off the diving board with no fear. My dad was at the bottom, like, waiting for me to jump in. My mom was like holding her breath on the side of the pool and just no hesitation. The older kids were like forming a line, like kind of nervous to go. And I'm just charging up there, like literally just walking and going off the diving board. And to the same like kind of love for the water, my parents couldn't even get me out of the bathtub. They're like, all right, Katie, time to get out. I'm like, nope. And I'm like kicking my legs in there. So if I wasn't destined to be a swimmer just off of those 2 things, I don't know what else to as the prediction for that. But really, just love sports in general. Was a huge kind of like tomboy, but had like the big obnoxious bow in my hair. So the tomboy with the girly side. Tried all the sports, did all the sports, and then just narrowed it down to soccer, swimming, and cross country from about like middle of grade school up to junior high. And just that whole time, like I just really enjoyed being active. I loved being in the water. I loved being on the soccer field. I loved running. Sports came somewhat easy for me. I was pretty competitive at a young age. However, I was a little bit smaller than a lot of girls my age. I went through puberty much later. So in soccer, I got beat up a little bit more because I was still very aggressive, but like going up to these girls like 5 inches taller than me and like 30 pounds heavier than me. And then in swimming, you're definitely at a disadvantage if you don't have a little bit more meat or muscle on your bones. So once I got through that kind of growth spurt, it was later in high school. And that's when I had already determined I was just going to stick to the sport of swimming. I eliminated soccer and cross country going into high school and just, did the hard work, showed up, put it in every single day, but did everything right out of the pool too. In the sense of eating properly, getting good rest. I wasn't like the kid like going to the parties in high school. I was very dedicated to my sport because I think that's really important. And a very interesting aspect of sports. It's like, sure, I'm doing the work in the pool, but what are you doing out of the pool? Because that's just as important. And I think sometimes we don't really think about those little things. And so, I'm very flattered and honored and humbled to say I made my first Olympic team at 17 years old. So obviously a little young and great things came after that.
And I can't wait to talk about that because you write about coming back to high school after going to your first Olympics, and at 17, which is that's mind blowing to me. So let's go back just quickly because I'd love to get your thoughts on having to choose a sport because I'm kind of torn on this. I was the kid. I wasn't great at any sport, but I played them all. Okay. And I can, I can play them all, just not very good at any one particular sport. But it seems like, and I have a 23-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old son, and it seems like my daughter, who I think you and I shared just briefly before going on camera here, she was a competitive swimmer at a young age as well. And it seems like these days kids almost have to choose if they're going to be great and elite in a sport. They kind of have to make that choice by 9 or 10. I mean, they can dabble in some other things, but it's so hyper competitive now. And as a former, you know, elite swimmer at that, I mean, you're always an elite swimmer, but competing at that level, what are your thoughts on that? On children, really, their children at that age having to make that big decision in their life.
Well, I'm pretty opposed to that concept. I believe if you are dedicated and committed to one sport intensely at the age of 9, you're not going to make it to college in that same sport. The rate
Mhm.
of burnout is just tremendous. And your body's still developing and your likes and dislikes are still being discovered. I think what's
Yeah.
so cool about sports is that one sport is going to only benefit your other sports. Like when I was swimming, it helped my soccer. When I was playing soccer, it helped my swimming.
Mhm.
And then my cross country helped all three of them. So it's like you're cross training in these sports. And at 9 years old, I mean, come on. But I see it, I hear it. We don't have children yet. And, that is kind of some of the complaints that I'm seeing some from my friends, like how intense it's getting at such a young age. And I just don't think it
Yeah.
needs to be. And you're taking out the love of the sport, you're taking out the fun, you're starting to put anxiety into your child. They feel that stress that you're being like so regimented to this sport that's supposed to be like a hobby to keep you in shape. And I think,
Yeah.
a lot of the mindset is like getting your kid into college with it. And it's like, sure, that's great if you can support that. But is your kid going to even make it to college if you're going that
Mhm.
aggro at a sport so young? I just think the burnout, it has to be the number one thing that you have to be worried about. When I meet parents like, oh, my kid swims and they just love it. That is the coolest thing for me to hear because swimming is grueling, like 5 hours a day, 4 hours in the water, staring at a black line, back and forth, back and forth. If your kid loves that, that's amazing. But then I have friends being like, oh, my kid doesn't really love swimming. I'm like, I get it, but don't force them to do that. Like, let them have an opinion,
Yeah.
like, let them pick. Because that's how for me personally, I think that's why I had success. I wasn't just dedicated to one sport at a young age. I kept my options open. I had diverse friends in different sports and was going to tournaments and swim meets and cross country races. And I think as a child, because kids get bored so easily. So it was never boring.
Sure.
It's always something different, going somewhere different, different teammates, different coaches. And I enjoyed it. I loved it. And obviously, as you get deeper into your sport, you're going to have burnout regardless. I really do think that. Um, but I
Yeah.
but I didn't dedicate myself just to swimming until high school. So it's like I'm prolonging that burnout.
Yeah. Yeah. What role did your parents play? Because really, elite athletes, elite young athletes, almost always have to have a strong support network at home,
Mhm,
whether it's a single parent or both parents.
mhm.
What role did your parents play in you becoming world class?
Well, they were the biggest impact in my sporting career, absolutely, hands down. Just their dedication, obviously, to getting me to where I needed to be. Because obviously, the athlete has to be dedicated, but the parent has to be equally dedicated. You sat through those long
Mhm.
swim meets, you know what those are like. Some parents don't want to do it. I get it. The
Well,
early morning workouts, like my poor father had to take me at like 4:15 in the morning. I didn't even talk to him because I was like so miserable that early in the morning. And he was dedicated to getting me up, to getting me there until I got my license as well. And more, I think more importantly, obviously, than dedication, is that my parents love me unconditionally no matter what. First place, last place, DQ, time improvement, no time improvement. And I think that's where my lack of fear for failure came in, because I knew I was always loved no matter what. So if you feel
yeah,
that unconditional love from your parents, you shouldn't have any anxiety or nerves or stress going into a competition, because you're not feeling like you're going to let somebody down if you don't do well. And so I knew
yeah,
that my worth wasn't determined off the type of swimmer I was, but our focus was always in our household to be a nice person. And so I felt like, I had nothing to lose. Like, get up, get behind the blocks, get excited, race hard. My parents aren't going to be like loving me any less if it's not a gold medal.
yeah, yeah. It's so funny you said, you've sat through those meets. For any parents out there who have had children in competitive swimming, they know what we're talking about. But for those listeners that haven't, let me just share with you from a parent's perspective. it's the most exciting 60 seconds that you can imagine, because your child is swimming his or her heart out, and it's as competitive as a race as can be. And then it's 45 minutes of pure boredom while you're waiting for the next heat for your child to swim. You love the other kids. I'm sure they're great kids, but you really don't care to watch 45 minutes of kids you don't really know swim until your child then swims his or her next heat. And that's 60 seconds of just pure parental bliss, followed by another 45 minutes. That goes on 4 times.
7 hours.
Yes, it is something else. Oh yeah. The whole weekend. But I'll tell you, but the 4 minutes that she was in the pool for those 4 heats were just, I couldn't be more proud. All right. So when did you say, and this, I don't know if I've ever asked an Olympian, because I've talked to not several, but a couple. When did you say, you know what? I think I'm good enough at this to beat anybody in the world, which, like, at some point, a switch has to flip where you think, I could beat anybody else on this planet at this race in my division. When did
My
that
light bulb
happen?
moment was when I first made I made my first international competition was 1999 at the Pan American Games. So I was 16 years old, and that was the first time going representing our country, getting that honor, and to be in an environment like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And going into that meet, I knew I was good, but I don't think I realized how good I was. And then going when you go and you race in the U.S., you're just racing fellow Americans, but then going to the Pan American Games, you're actually getting that international competition. So I won both of my races at that meet, the 400 freestyle and the 800 freestyle, and I set 2 Pan American records. And that was like my aha moment. I was like, okay, I think I'm pretty good. And that was like the confidence that kind of kicked in from that meet. I would say like my confidence was never that weak as a young athlete. It was more of recognizing that I could take on not just swimmers in America, but across the globe.
Yeah. So that's 16. And then really a short time after that, you're at the Olympics.
Right.
And do you, I can only imagine you're competing against the best people on the planet on out of 7 billion people. So what kind of mindset switch happened also from, hey, I just won 2 races at the Pan American Games. Now I'm stepping up to the Olympics. That there has to be a mindset switch, because I guess I'm asking, a baited question, because I think there's a parallel if somebody's listening that's in business and they want to go to the next level. You were making a conscious decision to go to the next level, and I'd love to know how you thought about that.
That's interesting to think of, because even like in my soccer days, like my soccer coach used to always have me do the one that would do the penalty kicks or the shootouts. And he would be like, Kaitlin has ice in her veins. So I don't know like necessarily if the mindset shifted very much. It was a more of, this is the next goal. Okay. So it was like building up, make it to the Pan American Games. And then my coaches pulled me into a meeting and they just asked, do you want to train for the Olympics? I said, yes, let's do it. And that's all we talked about it. Nothing really changed because we were already like putting in the work. Like my coaches were already training us to be the best that we could be. It just happened to be that my best could place me on the Olympic team. So now it's just more of an understanding, a game plan that was put into play. Because and something that I believe in so much, and what my goal is and what I love to share is we should always, as individuals, be striving to be the best version of ourselves. So sometimes that puts you at the Olympics. Sometimes it doesn't, but not everybody's an Olympian, but it doesn't mean you're less of a human. It's just your skill set, what you're blessed with. But how can you be the best version of yourself? What skill sets are you blessed with that just shine? So we should always be training for our own personal Olympics. And so I think for me, it was like my coaches, I think if they're being honest, they probably had Olympics back in their head for me before I did, but we were training for the Olympics before I even said I wanted to train for the Olympics.
Let's not forget, you're going to high school during this time, right? So you're a high school kid, which has its own challenges and its own, living in Southern California.
Yes.
How did you balance going to high school with, I'm sure you had early morning and then afternoon practices, right? Probably 2 a days.
Right.
How
Going
did
back
how did you put all that together?
Yeah, it goes back to my parents again. I mean, we were always raised with balance in our life. It wasn't always swimming. I was class president. I was in yearbook. I was in different clubs on campus. Again, just keeping that balance and trying to help the burnout and just keeping you as normal as possible. I feel like the way we were raised was to simply be kind to others, work hard, stay out of trouble, say yes or say please, say yes to all opportunities that come your way that make sense. And I think, the morning workouts were hard. Those were really challenging for me because I am not a morning person.
Sure.
And even though we live in beautiful sunny Southern California, the mornings are really cold and our pools are outdoors. So you're stripping
Mm.
down to essentially nothing. You're jumping in a cold pool at 4:30 in the morning. You swim for 2 hours and you have to go to school all day, come home for an hour, do some homework, have another lunch, and then go back to the pool. So the grind was definitely, I mean, something to this day. I'm like, I can't believe I did that, especially because I sleep so much
Sure.
now too. I was like, I don't know how I did morning workouts. And so I think really it's a ripple effect, right? So my parents set the precedent, and it was the way our values and our family just our family just values and just game plan. We still went on summer
Yeah.
holiday and still had vacation time and still had a lot of family time. And I just think like swimming was something that was a really big part of my life, but it was not my full life, my entire life. And
Mm.
it wasn't my only identity.
Ooh, that's powerful right there, because it's so easy in sports, in business, in music, whatever, that it becomes your identity.
Yeah.
And then if there is any setback, it's a setback internally to your identity, which is a much more difficult thing to handle mentally.
Right.
Wow, it's funny. You just glazed over that, but that's a huge point because when you wrap your identity around one thing, it's a slippery slope. And it sounds like you had a much more balanced approach.
Absolutely. And I think that's, I get the question a lot too, like, how was the transition out of swimming? And I mean, it wasn't easy, but the fact that I didn't just identify as an Olympic swimmer, I wore other hats, I had other strengths, I had other ways to give back. That transition was a little bit easier for me because I wasn't wrapped
Yeah.
up in that as my entire identity.
This segment is sponsored by Rockbox Fitness Franchising. Take control of your destiny and join the boutique fitness revolution with Rockbox Fitness. If you're ready to make a real impact in your community and own your own business that empowers people to achieve their best life, then Rockbox is the opportunity you've been looking for. They provide comprehensive support from site selection, upfit, training, and turnkey marketing, so you can open your studio with confidence and a strong recurring revenue member base. Visit rockboxfitness.com and click on franchise opportunities to learn more about this exciting venture in the fast-growing boutique fitness industry. It's time to turn your passion for fitness and for business into a thriving venture. All right, so take us to qualifying for the Olympics at 17 years of age and actually then going to the Olympics. Talk us through that.
It was such a whirlwind. I mean, it was so surreal because I think that was the first swim meet that I had really felt like a lot of eyes on me. Like I'd be walking down the pool deck and everybody was like looking at me, and I'm just like, why is everybody looking at me? And it's like, you're predicted to make this team. So once I made the team, I was really grateful because my main event was the first night. So I qualified on the first night of competition, which is a huge relief. And then you kind of just get to
Hmm.
enjoy the rest of the time. But as soon as I made the team, I just remember just being in disbelief, but also like, at the same time, knowing I earned it, I deserved it. I raced hard. I was the fastest American in the country. And I just wanted to see my coaches. And as soon as I saw my coaches, I'm like, okay, where are my parents? And so trying to get them down from the crowd to come down. And it's just a whirlwind. You go through processing, you do media, you're signing autographs. And again, I'm like, I'm 17 years old. So that was so surreal. And then you go home for a little bit and you pack your bag and you go immediately to a training camp. And again, that was just such a trip for me, like just to know that I was going to be, leaving and not going to be with my parents for a long time. And then we're going to Sydney, Australia, which is like, the the number one sport in their country is swimming. So we're going down there like as
Yeah.
rock stars and having like paparazzi as we get off the plane. I'm like, I'm not used to this as like a 17-year-old swimmer from California. Like we just don't have that type of drive or attention to our sport in the States. And so to get down there it was pretty surreal.
Yeah, that's wow. Wow. All right. So walk us through competing in that first Olympics. And then we'll I definitely want to talk about just your experience returning to high school, because that was, you talked about that in the book, but talk about, I mean, you're at the Olympics. So like, wow.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
like it was still like those like pinch me, is this really happening moments. And, I had some races that went really well. I had some races that didn't go so well, but everything was just really a learning experience for me to be in that
Yeah.
scenario. Again, like it was pretty crazy, as you mentioned. Like I made my first international team at 16. The next year I'm going to the Olympics. So I really didn't have this type of experience at all to be at this level. And just to try to process what it's like to walk out into the stands that I'm not used to, so many spectators and my legs feeling like jello, and sitting in the ready room where, the 7 other competitors are just glaring at each other from across the world and they don't even speak the same language. And it was just truly like navigating those waters of like not being intimidated and not letting your nerves overcome you. And I just had a lot of learning experiences at these games, highs and lows, like everything in between. I'm so happy that I was able to come home with a bronze medal. When you make the Olympic team, everybody's just like all eyes on getting a medal. And I wanted
Yeah.
to do better. I was predicted to do really well in my best a race. I ended up getting 4th, and that was actually kind of a crushing moment for me. That was a time where I felt a lot of expectation, and I just felt like I was going to come home with a medal, maybe even gold, and then to touch the wall and to see 4th place, I was like, ooh, that was not a part of the game plan. So that was my first
Mm.
race, and then it was learning how to pivot off of that and not let like one defeat knock you down for the entirety of the meet. And that's like, the learning moment for me was it's still a really good time for me. And I can't control what the 3 other women did that race. Like you can't control the
Yeah.
uncontrollables, and you can't compare yourself either. If you were your best that
Yeah.
day, you got to be happy with whatever color medal or medal you didn't get if that was your best. Because that day I was the best version of myself, but there's just 3 other women that were faster than me. And then my
Yeah.
next race, I was a part of a very iconic event where my fellow American won gold and upset Madam Butterfly of Australia. And it was like the talk of the meet. And for me, it was a good race for me. I got 6th, but it was really special for me to be a part of such an iconic race where, my role was really a supportive teammate, celebrating with her, being in the pool
Mm.
with her. She was like in disbelief. I raised her hand up and everybody went crazy. So that is a moment that, even though it was one of my lowest rankings, 6 at the Olympics, it
Hmm.
was like a very surreal moment to be there as a teammate, as to be a proud American, to be in that. And then my final race was the bronze medal. So it was kind of like this, but it was this as far
Yeah.
as learning and just taking it all in, and then getting a taste of it and knowing I wanted to go back for another one.
Kaitlin, you have such a wonderful outlook on, I mean, the fact you just lit up right there talking about another teammate winning. Like you talked more about that than winning the bronze medal, which just speaks to your character. It speaks to your character. Wow, that's fantastic. And you know what? I'm just going to ask you this because I've read books on other Olympic athletes. I've seen interviews, and from what I understand, after your events are over, of course, you walk the straight path, but after the events are over, like the Olympic Village or whatever that's called for just the is just pandemonium, like just kind of crazy, because you've got all these people that are in great shape and the adrenaline's on high and everything. But from reading about you in your book, like you've just always seemed to keep your head on straight and not go down the paths that may detract from your performance, or even things that just aren't as constructive for your body and whatnot.
Right.
But is it true, like that? What, I don't know if is it called the Olympic Village, whatever it's called, where
Yeah.
all the athletes stay, is just kind of crazy after a lot of the events end. Is that
That's
true?
that's like, honestly, Roger, that's like my second most asked question. The first one is, do you know Michael Phelps? And the second one is Olympic Village as crazy as everybody says it is? And
Yeah.
honestly, like, then, like you said, I don't really know. Like, I didn't see anything
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, there was funny stories, there's rumors, there's things that the media
Yeah.
catches on to, and they write stories about it, and some of them are true. But it's like, I was 17 at my first Olympics. You know, it was like I was
This is
not
true.
this
Yeah.
wild child. I was not this party animal. I had a curfew. I like Team USA has
Yeah.
curfews, and I had like the earliest curfew out of everybody. Like in Australia, you could be 18 to drink, but I still wasn't even drinking age there, you know? So I think my
Yeah.
parents had to sign a note to let me to stay out till like 10:30. So I didn't see much in 2000.
Yeah.
2004, like I was in like my junior year of college. So, you know, my social life has definitely improved at that time. But, you know, my boyfriend at the time was on the team. So we were together. But, you know, you hear stuff, you see stuff. But yes, I mean, I think you're attracted to in fit, like-minded people. And then there's this whole other like just dopamine kick, adrenaline that's like running through. And then
Sure.
afterwards, too, like it's not just the athletes, but the sponsors are putting on like these huge parties. Like, what do you expect? So
Yeah.
a
This is
lot of the
true.
athletes in general work hard, play hard, work hard, party hard, you know, but
Yep.
the way I was raised, like there's a time and place for everything, you know. So stay
Yeah.
focused, you know, eyes on the prize. And then sure, I definitely let loose in 2004, but in 2000 I was such a baby. I was like, okay, I got to go back
Yeah.
for curfew.
It's time for bed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's let's talk about that. You're 17. You come back to SoCal, and then you got to go back to high school. And you said, if I remember reading, you said like there were reporters that would come into class to film you or you know interview you and stuff, and it was kind of a surreal experience. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I came in, I think I was like 2 weeks late to school because the Olympics were a little bit later and high school had started. And so that in itself, it's like, oh, Kaitlin hasn't been here for 2 weeks because she's at the Olympics, you know? And one of my best friends had sent me a picture of like this boy I had a crush on in high school. He was like wearing a Kaitlin Sandeno shirt, like the first day of school, you know, stuff like that. I was like, oh my gosh, no way. And like my first day coming back, they had like a Kaitlin Sandeno day, like an assembly and a DJ and a recognition. And that was all really surreal. But you know, it's so funny because you come off this huge high, and then you have to go to like algebra class. I'm like, wah wah, you know. And so again, that just like goes back to like the balance for sure. And it was extremely flattering. You know, my community was so
Yeah.
supportive. My family, friends were so supportive. And, you know, I think I took it well. I think I handled it well. Pretty like kind of grounded person. My two older sisters definitely keep me in check. And we were just raised that way. And I was just really appreciative. Like it's
Yeah.
just to feel that love and supportive. It's, you know, truly a blessing. Absolutely. And, you know, just didn't let it get to me. You know, I think I really didn't have any type of like breakdowns. And I actually had a little breakdown before I left for the Olympics because or before the Olympic trials, before I made it, because everybody was like,
Yeah.
oh, she's going to make it. And all these like articles come out and photo shoots. I'm like, I just want to make it already, you know? And so,
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
than that, when I came home, was just taking it in stride. You know, I think in high school and being a girl, you definitely come across mean girls and jealousy and trying to navigate those waters. And really, as my mom always says, it always just comes back to like be a nice person, you know, because if
Yeah.
you're a nice person, nobody can hold anything really against you, you know. So it's not like this, like, oh,
Yep.
Kaitlin thinks she's like so cool and so, you know, above everybody and she's really rude. But like they couldn't say that.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like I was really
Yeah.
kind to people and didn't let my ego get the best to me. But I would say there's definitely the post-Olympic blues. You know, it's like, how do you go
Oh,
from here
sure.
again to like sitting in algebra? And that
Yeah.
too, for my second Olympics, I had to go back to college. So those blues definitely exist. So it's getting through those. But for me, it was so fun because I went straight into like homecoming, recruiting trips. What college am I going to go to? So I think I was grateful, or I was definitely blessed to have those kind of distractions to get me through the little bluesy period.
Yep. Yep. And then you went to USC, and so for those of you on the East Coast, we're not talking about University of South
Exactly.
Carolina; it's University of Southern California. Um, and of course, there's a nickname for USC out in California, right?
Yes.
But you're in college, and you're still training, knowing you're going back to the 2004 Olympics. Like, is that
No, not a given.
like you're on? No.
No, no.
Wow. Okay.
I wish. You have to go through the process all over again. You have to go to the Olympic trials. You have to be the first or second fastest American. And it wasn't going well for me in college. My freshman year, I had a ton of injuries. And then it just kind of one thing after another kept happening to me. Car accident, sickness, really bad asthma, burnout. the freshman
Yep.
15. I think I had like freshman 25. Like it was
Sure.
hard. College was hard for me. The class load was hard for me. USC is definitely a really strong school in their sports, but they really hold you accountable for your academics as well. And couldn't figure out
Yep.
when to sleep. It was just a lot for me to try to, like, I felt like in high school I could figure out my balance a lot easier than when I got to college, mostly because of the education side of it. It was challenging, but it wasn't looking that good for me to make my second Olympics at first. My freshman, sophomore year were not successful. But luckily, just that desire, that dream, that touch of going to my first Olympics, it's addicting. Like you want to go back. Like
Of
nothing
course.
really matches that environment. It's the pinnacle of your sport. So
Yeah.
luckily I just push through. I never gave up. It was something I knew I wanted so badly. And I think, anybody can really relate to that. If you want something bad enough, you will figure out a way. I love the saying, everything's figure outable. And, obviously, there are times where sometimes it is a little out of your hands. But I think if you want something where there's a will, there's a way. And just going back to a second games and not giving up with my back injury, like when a doctor told me that he didn't know if I'd even swim again, let alone be as fast as I was when I was 17. It's like, I didn't want to peak at 17 years old. And again, going back
Yeah.
to your comment, it's like some of these kids, they were their best when they were like 13, 14 years old, like there's too much life ahead of you to be at your best at 13. So
Yeah.
I had just the strongest support group with between my parents, my coaches, my physical therapist, handful of like key teammates that were just like determined to like lift me up when I was down. And through just putting in the grind, I was able to make that 2014. Really
Because
for
you were swimming hurt for a while.
swimming
You were
hurt for about
swimming.
2.5 years, three
Yeah.
years.
This segment is sponsored by Beamlight Sauna Franchising. Are you looking to take control of your destiny and own your own business? Do you want a great brand in a rapidly growing market? Well, Beamlight Sauna is a nationwide health and wellness franchise with amazing opportunities in select markets. You can bring the power of infrared sauna and red light therapy to your community while you build a thriving business. Beamlight Sauna offers support that includes site selection, build out, even pre-launch programs and turnkey marketing so you can open your studio with a large recurring revenue member base. To learn more about business ownership and franchise opportunities in the fast-growing health and wellness space, go to beamlightsauna.com. That's BEEM lightsauna.com and click on franchise opportunities to learn more. All right, so we get to the 2004 Olympics. You qualify, get to the 2004. Now you've already been there and done that.
Mhm.
So I would imagine still there's got to be crazy nerves and expectations, but probably a little more. You're a little bit older, a little more
Yeah.
mature. I'm sure. More settled going into those second games.
Absolutely, absolutely, and a different
Yeah.
mindset. Like, I was just so grateful to be there because I think,
Mm,
before when I was young, like, I didn't have injuries. Pretty much every time I swam, I did well. I mean, stuff's easy when you're
yeah.
young and easy to recover and tiny and
Sure.
just like a little, like, Energizer bunny, and then as you get older, things get harder, and for me, I honestly didn't think I would even make it to the Olympic trials in 2004 at one point. So I had just this new sense of gratitude just to be there and just happy to be there. And that was something that a legendary coach, Eddie Rees, pointed out to me when I started competing at that games. He's like, Kaitlin, and I was like on fire. Like every time I swam, I was just like doing great things. And he's like, Kaitlin, you just look like a different swimmer out there. I'm like, oh, do I? He's like, you look like you're just having so much fun. And it's like,
Oh,
it's so like cliche and so cheesy, but I mean, it's so
no,
true.
it's true.
It's so
Yep.
true. And I think, my mindset was just so different from 2000 to '04, just being like, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so grateful to be here. I can't believe I'm here. What an honor to wear the American flag on my cap, to have it on my chest. Like, pinch me, is this happening? Like to do it once, but then to do it twice. And then, like you said, to be a little bit older, wiser. And I had learned, like I had taken everything that I had learned from 2000, the highs and the lows, and applied those to '04. And then it was like this fairy tale swim meet for me.
Wow. All right. So walk us through that because you did really well there. So talk us through that.
So my number one, like my strongest race was on the first night, and it was like another showdown from the girl that beat me by like 7.5 seconds the year previously and was the defending world record holder and champion. And I had gotten fourth at those games, and we were right next to each other going into finals. And it's, still to this day, it was a swim that was truly an out of body experience. Like I didn't feel tired. I felt so electric the whole race. I felt so strong. I felt so in control. And it just came down to her and I under the flags, like nobody was near us. And she outtouched me by 12/100ths of a second. And I got the silver, but I broke a 12-year-old American record. And the biggest kind of celebration for me is that I broke my own personal plateau that I had been stuck at for 4 years. And this was a race that I was getting really frustrated with. I wanted to give up on it. Every time I swam it, I was going the same time. And I was just like, I just don't want to do this anymore. My coach is like, no, this is your best race. You're not giving this one up. And so, when I saw the second place, I was like, okay, awesome. And then when I saw my time, I was like, ecstatic, like celebrating. And people are like, does she think she won? Like she got second.
Yeah,
And I
I
think
remember reading
that's,
that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's like that's like my huge takeaway for people. It's just like we live in this society where it's like gold medal or nothing. And it's like that was my personal gold. So I'm going to celebrate it as a gold because to me it was, and it's like
Yeah.
I get out of the pool and I go through the media and they're like, oh, how does it feel to just lose a gold medal? And it's like, we live in such a twisted world, like
Oh,
it's
jeez.
like,
What kind of question is
I
that?
know, because silver's so bad. And I get bummed when I watch the Olympics now and people like almost like annoyed, like when they get silver or bronze. It's just like, dude, you just did something like so incredible that so many people sitting on
Yeah,
their couches wish they could do. Like, be happy.
yeah,
And I don't know. I don't get that. And ultimately, like, it's just a sport. Like, chill out. And so that
yeah.
just set the tone for the rest of my swimming. I swam the following day off of like no sleep because I was on cloud nine and like drug testing and you get home late. And it was like I went from having an out of body, like felt so good race to like the next day being it was hard. It was a hard race. I didn't think I could finish, ended up with a bronze medal in a race that I wasn't even planning on swimming that year, let alone at the Olympics.
Wow.
So it was like one of those, did that just happen? And it was just crazy
Yeah.
too, like things that I don't remember that my mom will share, like all international competitions for swimming are supposed to be indoors. Well, like Athens just ran out of time and there was no roof on the building. And so it was super windy that day. There's like white caps on the water. And my mom's like, do you remember
Oh
that?
my
Like, no,
gosh.
not at all. It's like, you're so locked in, she's like, yeah, that
Yeah.
was so windy. And like right before you were diving in, I was like, I don't remember that whatsoever. It was just a cool race. Like I was like last, like pretty much the whole race and ended up getting third at the end. And then I got to go do some like cool like publicity and be on some TV shows and kind of like let loose for a few days, but while still staying focused because I had two more races and ended up getting fourth into the 200 butterfly. And then that like moments later stepped up to be the anchor on the 4x200 freestyle relay where we won gold and broke the oldest world record in the history books at that time. And we wiped off the last East German women's record that stood too. So that was a pretty iconic moment. Even like swimmers and coaches from other countries were coming over to us just because it was known to be a doping record, but they weren't able to take it off the books until somebody broke it.
Yeah.
So it was 17 years to the date we broke it. So that was just,
Wow.
that was the most incredible way to wrap up my Olympics. And that ended up being the end of my Olympic career. I thought I was training for a third Olympics and things just didn't go well for that. So looking back on it now, being happily retired, it was like, this is a pretty cool way to wrap up my Olympic career with
Yeah.
such an iconic
Yeah.
moment. I mean, the gold is amazing. The world record is amazing. But for me, like personally, like getting a doped record off the books, like that's just like, that's my bragging rights right there.
Yeah. You're right. You righted a wrong, basically. I mean, let's be honest.
Exactly.
You
Oh,
guys
I'm
righted a wrong. Yeah.
so opposed to
Yeah.
cheating. It just drives me crazy. So to get that off the books, it's like it was very monumental.
Yeah. Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about the Jessie Rees Foundation, because you write extensively about it in your book, and I was sharing with you again just for a few minutes before we went live here, how passionately it's written about in your book. And I would just love for you to talk about how you got involved with that foundation, your role with that foundation, and why it's so important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when we briefly touched on like the transition out of sport and trying to find your way, it wasn't like super easy for me. Of course not. But at the same time, it was hard to find something that filled my cup as much as competing. And, as I would say we're like probably like C-list celebrities in the Olympian world. We get asked to do like a lot of different like charity work and different appearances for charity and whatnot. And I usually say yes. I have a huge heart for that, but it just is so shallow. Like you come and you like sign a couple autographs, and then like you don't even really know what the foundation's about. And I just had
Yeah.
felt like I really wanted to be connected, one that like really spoke to my heart. But I was just gonna like let that happen organically. And at the time, I had started a swim team with my sister where we were just trying to promote like exercise and fitness. It wasn't a competitive team. We
Mm.
just wanted kids to get off their computers and come in the sunshine and swim some laps with us. And so in the neighborhood that we live in, or the community we live in, there's a lot of competitive swim teams. And so it's a very unique type of setting. But we had this mom that was affiliated to both worlds, like the competitive swimming world, and then had another child on our team. And she approached me asking me if I had heard about this little girl from the Mission Viejo Nadadors, which is a very competitive team in our area, that was diagnosed with these inoperable brain tumors. And I was like, no, like, what's the story? So she told me all about Jessie and had asked if I had any type of like memorabilia or something that I could pass along to her, like sign. I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. So I found her like an old like national team warm up, signed it, passed it to the parent to pass it on. And like, just please keep me like informed, like how much, what we could do, how we can help. The swimming community really rallies around one another. And so,
Mhm.
through Jessie's journal, or through her journey, she started a journal on Facebook with her dad, just giving updates and kind of like what she was going through and different events that they're going to hold. And she had an event that was to raise money for her, all of her hospital costs. And I came down with a couple other national team members and Olympians. And that was my first time meeting Jessie and meeting Jessie's dad. And Jessie was really frail. She was in a wheelchair. She was wearing glasses and a mask. And Jessie, like our interaction was really brief, but you could just like tell she wasn't doing well. But my interaction with her father, it was a moment I'll never forget. He has like these crystal blue eyes. And it was like the first time for me as an adult, first time in my life, I feel like I looked at an adult and just felt their pain through their eyes. And I
Mm.
just was like, how can I help? And it just kind
Yeah.
of started a conversation. And it wasn't until after Jessie passed, she fought for 10 months and 2 days before she passed away. Her dad reached out to me and asked if I could help continue what Jessie had started, which was the Joy Jars. So Joy was her middle name. They're
Mm.
64-ounce containers, and they're age and gender specific to hospital approved toys. And Jessie started this mission where she wanted every single kid fighting cancer to get one of these and to encourage them to NIGU, which stands for never ever give up. And so she started it when she was with us. She got her like little paper lunch bags out and was decorating it, putting stickers and taking her own toys. And her parents are like, "You're serious about this?" She's like, "Yeah, I want every kid getting one of these." And so her parents rallied behind her and then the community, and they started this nonprofit. So after Jessie passed, they asked if I could attend a hospital visit where we would pass out Jessie's Joy Jars. And it was actually going to be at the hospital that she was being treated at in Orange County. And I had never done a hospital visit before. I had never been inside of a hospital. Hadn't been that close to cancer at that time. So I didn't know what to expect. But, I was like, I'm in. And so I did that first visit. And it was like nothing I had experienced before. Just being
Mm.
able to go into a room with so much sadness and to flip it to joy, and a child getting the opportunity to kind of forget about what they're going through, the parents, what they're going through, because it really does affect the whole family. And just
Oh
spending
yeah.
time with them, showing them my Olympic medals and giving them Jessie's Joy Jars with all the fun things inside. They just burst with joy. And that first hospital visit turned into 160 of them later, and just being a part of the foundation in any capacity at that time, for like my first like 5 years with them, it was all the visits and then getting other Olympians and pro athletes on board to do the same. And then COVID hit, and then that has made things really challenging getting back into the hospitals. So now,
Sure.
really, for Jessie, I do events for them from time to time, but really spreading the word about their
Yeah.
what their mission is, because they're all about, we will care until there's a cure. because there are a lot of foundations out there that are for trying to find a cure, which is fantastic. But what are we going to do in the time being? So it's
Yeah.
like, let's care on these kids as, they're going through this. And it's just been something so surreal in my life. I mean, and it's crazy too. Like, because then my mom was then diagnosed with breast cancer, and then my sister was diagnosed with
Mhm.
breast cancer. And it was like, I was just so shaped to be ready for that. And I was like the one that was like at all the hospital visits, taking all the notes, like the one that was like the rock for the family. It's just crazy how life ends up. And then I was speaking at an event last weekend, and I was sharing about the Jessie Rees Foundation kind of to wrap it up. And this woman was like, cry, cry, cry. She came up to me. She's like, I got a joy jar. I'm like, how did you get a joy jar? This is a grown woman. She's like, I had a pediatric cancer. And so and I've seen this before. I'll go into pediatric
Oh
wards,
my
but there will
gosh.
be adults, because adults can still get a pediatric cancer. And so she
Yeah.
was in there with her 5-year-old son. And so they actually like, she's like, oh, and they're like, no, give it to your son then. So then we were like crying at this event, and,
Oh,
it was just
geez.
like this
Yeah.
moment that was just so, it's just surreal, and God works in mysterious ways. And just to be a part of it's being a part of something bigger than myself, but I get to use my platform to get in, right? Like that's initially
Yeah.
like, sorry, Joe Blow can't just like walk into a hospital to like hang out with kids. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot that goes into
Yep.
getting cleared. So having these like Olympic medals and having the platform and, the notoriety that I had to get in was that opportunity to capitalize. And that's was so special for me. It was to kind of blend to, myself as a swimmer, and then myself done. How do I give back? How can I use like my story
Yeah.
to inspire? And when I really dissect my swimming career, it was all about never giving up. And now I'm working for a foundation that's whole mission is never, ever give up.
That's beautiful. I mean, that's just absolutely beautiful. I love that. All right, so I'm gonna ask you the last couple questions here, and because what you just shared is a beautiful transition into this first question. And this isn't meant to be dark by any means, but if we were to fast forward to the very end of your life, and we're at your funeral, and a loved one is reading your eulogy, and Kaitlin, they're only allowed to choose 3 words to describe you, and really to describe how you impacted them or the world. What 3 words do you hope that person chooses that describes you?
Mm. Empathetic, loyal, mm, and probably compassionate.
Yeah, the charity work you've done kind of speaks to all of that. Yeah, speaks to all of that. I love it. And then second to last one is, if I were to give you a magic wand, and you've been kind of all over the world, if I were to give you a magic wand, and you've seen different parts of the world, you've seen our world, you've seen our country, and you could wave that magic wand and make one change to the world would be different in
Mm.
one significant way, according to you. If you wave that magic wand tonight, when we wake up in the morning, how is the world different according to Kaitlin?
My goodness gracious. This the division that we have right now is just heartbreaking. So if we wave that wand and we woke up the next morning, we would be united. I think we're
Mm,
called to this earth to love one another, and I'm just not seeing it. And it's like, I
no.
feel like we've gotten away from the agree to disagree. Like that doesn't exist anymore. And it's like, we're all
Yep.
humans. We are all wired differently. We are all going to have our beliefs, but it's like, we need to love on one another, and this division has to go away. It's just
Yeah.
like for the next generations and there to come, like we can't keep going on this way.
Yeah. We're not on the right path. We are not on the right path with that. So many guests have answered in a very similar, the communication, that whatever. One guy answered, he's like, yeah, I would make people sit down and have a cup of coffee, because if I've been throwing rocks at you for 6,000 years and you've been throwing rocks at me for six, we probably need to sit down and figure this out. So
That's
just
good.
too much division, too much division. All right. Well, I think one of the most important question is, how can people follow you, connect with you, be part of your continued journey, and then also if you could also share how they could learn more about the Jessie Rees Foundation too, like both of those things.
That'd be great. Yeah. So the Jessie Rees Foundation, you could go to the website, jessierees.org, or NEGU, NEGU will get you there. They have a great social media platform as well with the Jessie Rees Foundation. A lot of times it's known as Team NEGU. We've really become very popular in the NFL space and NASCAR. So you'll see a lot of professional football players wearing the Jessie Rees Foundation wristband. Patrick Mahomes always has his on. And then for myself, I'm just at Kaitlin Sandeno. I'm probably most active on Instagram. I'm really excited this summer. I'll be going into my third time being the on deck live MC for the Olympic trials. So this summer is going to be an exciting summer. I kind of like go in waves with social media. Like I love it, and then I hate it, and then I can't look at it, and then I have a lot of cool things to share. Going back to just trying to bring lightness to the world. And sometimes I get on social media and it's just too dark for me. So I take some good social media detoxes, but I'm going to start getting a little bit more active on social media, specifically Instagram at Kaitlin Sandeno.
Perfect. We'll put both the foundation and your IG handle in the show notes so that listeners can just hit it right there. Yeah, awesome. Well, one, I just want to say thank you. You have a spirit and a light about you, and it's authentic because it's the exact person that I read in the book presented here today. So like there's a consistency there that just shows me you're the genuine real deal. And I just appreciate your positivity and what you're doing and the change you're bringing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. I feel like, we're put on this planet to make a positive impact. And I hope it's contagious, and I hope it can ripple out, and same to you. Good vibes always. And thank you for having me, and all the best to the listeners out there.
Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.